Chapter 10. I apologize for the quality of the recordings, Lakinda said, tapping her Questus to send the Grey Shrike's sensor data across the conference room table to Thrawn and his first officer. But the battle dreadnought stayed between us and the smaller ship throughout most of the battle, and on the rare occasions when it moved, there was usually missile debris blocking the view. All by design, of course, Thrawn commented, looking closely at the images on his Questies. Were you able to make any determination as to the type of craft? No, Lakinda said, feeling unreasonably like she was back at the academy being interviewed under the harsh glare of a senior officer. Unreasonably, because on a purely intellectual level, she recognized that neither Thrawn nor Samacro was leaning on her or even showing any disapproval over how she and her ship had handled their part of the battle. But the very fact that she'd traveled to the Springhawk instead of having this meeting on her own ship added an extra and unwanted emotional layer to the whole thing. Not that the choice of conference site had been anyone's decision. Thrawn was Myth, one of the 9, and Lakinda was Zodlak, one of the 40, and while military regulations expressly forbade any preferential treatment on the basis of family association, everyone knew decisions of etiquette nearly always fell in line with the rest of Ascendancy society. It might have been easier if Lakinda had brought one or more of her own officers along, instead of coming alone. But the Grey Shrike had taken damage, and she had no intention of pulling any of her people off repair work just to relieve some of her unwarranted anxiety. Of course, the fact that the day had once again been saved by Thrawn's tactical plan wasn't helping her mood any. Interesting that they worked so hard to prevent us from getting a closer look, Thrawn said. From the size and configuration, I'd guess it's either a personnel transport or freighter, but there's no way to tell which. If it even matters, Samacro pointed out. Either ship type can carry cargo or passengers or both. Exactly, Thrawn said. A more solid identification might give us a clue as to the intent, but as you say, that hardly matters. So why obscure it? Samacro asked. The likely possibility is that we would recognize the design and therefore learn who the battle dreadnought's masters are working with, Thrawn said. From which it follows that we may already know these allies, Lakinda said. Or may encounter them in the future, Thrawn said. He gazed at the Questies another moment, then set it down on the table. We'll continue to analyze the data, Senior Captain, as I presume you will as well. Of course, Lakinda said. What about the terrain they were flying over? Was the magistrate, or whatever her title is, able to identify it? The Magis, Thrawn corrected. He pulled up a page on his Questus and sent it across to her. Here's the data and our first pass analysis of the region. Unfortunately, she was of only limited help. That general region was once largely farmland, with some small rivers and lakes, several medium-sized cities, and 2 ranges of upthrust mountains. Doesn't look like there's much farmland left, Lakinda said, wincing as she peered at the images. Whether it had been deliberate or merely collateral damage, the Civil War had made a serious mess of the area. True, though it's difficult to tell for certain with all the smoke and dust clouds, Thrawn pointed out. Still, unless the plants that were grown there thrived on radioactivity, the battle dreadnought and transport might have started elsewhere and were simply heading over that spot when we got our first look at them. A valid point, Thrawn agreed. At any rate, there seems to be nothing more we can do right now, except alert the Ascendancy and see if the analysts on Scylla can do anything more with our data. Unless we want to send down a team for a quick look, Samacro suggested. If there's something blatantly obvious down there, they might be able to spot it. If we can't detect it with the Springhawks and Grey Shrike sensors, I doubt a cursory flyby would find anything, Thrawn said. And given Senior Captain Lakinda's news, a flyby would be all we would have time for. Is there anything more you can tell me about the message? Nothing beyond what I've already given you, Lakinda said. Admiral Aralani thought Supreme Admiral Jafosk may have sent it at the behest of the Syndicure, but that was just speculation. Based on the briefness of the order, and the lack of any when convenient modifiers that usually come to a commander who's already on a designated mission, Lakinda said. If it did come from the Syndicure, they're probably going to be annoyed that it's taken this long for you to respond. Is that a hint we should get moving? Samacro asked. I'm not saying or hinting anything, Lakinda said, feeling some annoyance. Whatever was going on, and whether it was coming from the Syndicure or even just Jafosk himself, there was no reason to put her in the middle of it. I'm here to deliver a message. I've delivered it. Your assignment is to return to the Ascendancy. Mine is to rendezvous with Admiral Aralani at the last Nicardan base we cleared out together after you left. I'd suggest due haste for both of us. Unfortunately, we still have one more leg to our mission, Samacro said. Before we can head back to Scylla, we need to return the Magis and her companion to Rapak. Lakinda felt her eyes narrow. If you're suggesting I do that instead of you— Actually, Mid-Captain, Thrawn said, none of us are going to Rapak. Samacro frowned. Excuse me, sir? Caregiver Thalias has already spoken to the Magis, Thrawn said. Having seen the devastation below, she's now even more fully convinced that her people are all dead and that only the physical planet itself can be saved. With due respect to you and the Magis, sir, that's a completely unwarranted conclusion, Samacro said. We were barely able to take a cursory look. A thorough evaluation would take days or weeks. Nevertheless, that's the conclusion she has reached, Thrawn said. She's therefore decided that upon her return to Rapak, she'll order her refugees to join the rest of their people in death. Lakinda stared at him. You mean she'll just flat out kill them? Not kill them, but simply order them to die, Thrawn said. They believe that in death they'll touch something they call the Beyond that will then allow them to join together and begin healing their planet. To what end? Lakinda asked. If the people are already dead, what does the planet matter? The Magus believes they should prepare a home for those who may someday adopt their former world as their own. Lakinda felt her throat tighten. Let me guess. She assumed those alien warships were proof that the real estate has already changed hands? If not proof, certainly a strong indication, Thrawn said. Caretaker Thalias and I have spoken to her at length and have been unable to change her mind. So that's it? Lakinda asked. She'll go back to Rapak and order her people to die, and she expects them to do that? Thrawn locked eyes with her. She's already ordered her companion to die, he said, his voice low and dark. He's already complied. What? Samacro demanded, his eyes going wide. When? Approximately an hour ago, Thrawn said, shortly before the three of us convened this meeting. He paused, and Lakinda saw a shadow of pain cross his face. Wingali's calculations seemed to have been off by a few days. So it would seem, Samacro said. His tone was cold, but Lakinda could tell the anger wasn't directed at his commander. What about their guards? Where were they? On duty as ordered, Thrawn said, but they knew the presumed timeline and weren't anticipating such an action yet. And you didn't say anything about it to us until now? We had more pressing matters to discuss, Thrawn said. Speaking out earlier wouldn't have benefited the deceased. Samacro took a deep breath, and Lakinda could see him forcing his mind and emotions back under control. For herself, she felt like she'd just been kicked in the stomach. What about the Magus? She's in no danger, Thrawn said. You just said she considers her situation hopeless. She has a duty to order her people to die, Thrawn said. She can't do that if she herself is dead. You think she'll buy that line of reasoning? Not really, Thrawn conceded. Caregiver Thalias already made that suggestion. In fact, the Magas argued in return that news of her death would raise a new person to her title, who would then be responsible for making that decision. In that case, I don't see how you can say she's out of danger, Samacro persisted. Sooner or later she'll figure out we're not going back to Rapak and take the obvious next step. She's out of danger, Thrawn said evenly, because she's currently asleep in a hibernation chamber. Samacro's mouth dropped open. She's what? Consider our options, Thrawn said. We could return her to Rapak, but there's no guarantee the Pakosh could or would keep her incommunicado. Unless we're prepared to let 200 people die at her command, we can't do that. Furthermore, if I'm to obey Senior Captain Lakinda's message, we don't have time for a side trip of that length. Our options are therefore to let the Magis die or to keep her aboard the Springhawk. I've chosen the latter. On what grounds? Samacro asked. There's no standing order that permits you to carry an alien indefinitely aboard an Ascendancy warship. It's not indefinite, but only until we can return her to Rapak, Thrawn said. Preferably after finding some hope for her and her people. As to justification, she's the direct cause of death of another passenger aboard my ship. Under those circumstances, I have the authority to put her in confinement until she can be delivered to a place of judgment. Her world is spinning its way right below us, Samacro said. We can send her there. We don't have time to find a proper location for her, Thrawn said. Putting her down in a random spot would likely be sending her to her death. Maybe that's what we have to do, Samacro said, starting to sound angry. Her life is her business. It's certainly none of ours. I believe it is, Thrawn said. All lives are important, and I resist the thought of standing by and watching 200 possibly needless deaths. Moreover, we know this world was important to the Nicardoon. Otherwise, why move to blockade Rapak when the refugees arrived there? There was, or is, something of interest down there, and the Magus may be the key to that mystery. For the security of the Ascendancy, we need to solve it. I doubt the Council or Syndicure would agree, Samacro pointed out. What do you think they will say to all this? Thrawn turned from him to look at Lakinda. Actually, he said, I wasn't going to tell them. Reflexively, Lakinda pressed back against her chair. Up until this point, she'd been feeling like an outsider, unwillingly dragged into eavesdropping distance of a family argument. Now, with that look, she was suddenly part of it. You can't be serious, Samacro said. Why not? Thrawn countered. As you yourself said, neither group would agree with this course of action. Yet you must also recognize that the presence of an alien battle dreadnought means there is potential danger here that must be uncovered. Even if I conceded that, there are practical considerations, Samacro said. How could you even hide her presence? Too many officers and warriors know she and her companion were aboard. Her companion has already ended his life, Thrawn said. The log will show that she too made that decision. She? Oh, Samacro said sourly. Right, of course. She made the decision but wasn't allowed to carry it out. The log will leave that point open for interpretation, Thrawn said, his eyes still on Lakinda. Senior Captain, comments? Lakinda took a deep breath. Not just in the middle of a family argument, but now invited to join in the battle. Now what was she supposed to do? The Springhawk is your ship, Senior Captain Thrawn, she said, a part of her mind noting that her voice had reflexively pitched itself into military formal. Verbal or not, this was definitely for the record. These decisions are yours, to stand or fall by. If you order me to remain silent, I will do so. She braced herself, provided I'm not required to directly lie to a superior. Thank you, Thrawn said gravely. I ask only that you refer any questions and questioners to me. As you say, I will stand or fall. I don't require or wish for you to stand or fall at my side. He turned back to Samacro. Nor do I wish that for you, Mid-Captain. Thank you, sir, Samacro said, his voice as formal as Lakinda's. But you're my commanding officer. If those are your orders, I of course will obey them. Thrawn nodded. Thank you both. He paused, seeming to shift mental gears. We'll leave for Chilla as soon as both ships are ready to fly. I don't wish either of us to still be here if the battle dreadnought sends reinforcements. If there are further repairs that can't be performed in hyperspace, we can stop along the way. He looked at Lakinda. If you'll signal me when you're ready, we can jump together. Agreed, Lakinda said. I'll alert the docking bay to prepare your shuttle, Thrawn continued. He stood up, the other two following suit. Make sure Admiral Aralani gets a copy of the data. The battle dreadnought's missile attacks on the Greyshrike weren't as definitive as I'd hoped, but we may still be able to determine whether or not they were the same weapons that destroyed the Nicardan base. And if they were, Lakinda said. Again, Thrawn locked eyes with her. Then the life and knowledge of the Magis and her people become even more important, he said. We need to determine if this is a new enemy standing on the Ascendancy's threshold. And then she told me we could probably teach the U-Balls some tricks, Lacris said, stuffing the last bit of breakfast fritter into her mouth and helping herself to another one from the platter. She said she could teach me how to do it, she added around the bite. Not with your mouth full, Lakansu admonished her daughter. Admonished her for about the 10th time in the past week, Lackfro noted to himself as he took another bite of his own fritter. He'd had a problem with youthful exuberance, overwhelming social politeness when he was a Midiger, and his daughter had clearly inherited those genes from him. Lakansu, on the other hand, had grown up in a much larger family with highly disciplined parents who had imposed that same self-restraint on her and the rest of their children. Lakfro tried to be more strict. Lakansu tried to be more casual. Their parenting approaches were getting closer together, but Lakfro was pretty sure the differences still sometimes drove Lakris crazy. Still, the Midiger dutifully finished chewing before continuing her part of the conversation. "I've never heard of anyone training U-balls," she said. "Have you?" "I haven't," Lakansu said, looking across the table at her husband. "Lakfro? They can certainly be trained," Lakfro said. "Getting them to follow the lead grozer sort of qualifies, though maybe that's just domestication. But to do tricks?" He shook his head. "I'm not sure they're even physically capable of doing anything except walking, eating, and creating crop fertilizer. And tasting delicious when roasted," Lakansu added. "No argument there," Lakfro agreed. "Well, I'm going to see if she can do it." She broke off, apparently remembering her mother's warning, and chewed furiously for a couple of seconds until her mouth was clear again. "Can I take her to the U-ball pen when I'm letting them out?" Lakfro hesitated. The Agbui visitors hadn't been nearly as much of a problem as he'd feared they might be when Councillor Lakuviv dropped them onto his land a couple of weeks ago. But while he and the other ranchers in the area were working hard to be good hosts, he also didn't want the aliens getting too comfortable with his land, his animals, and especially his family. Still, Lakris and Haplif's daughter Frosif seemed to have struck up a tentative friendship, and for a loner like Lakris that was no mean accomplishment. And really, the strangers were only going to be here for a few months. "I suppose so," he told Lakris. "Just make sure you warn her not to get in their way, or between them and the grozers. You know how Slobber gets when someone messes with his herd." "I'll be careful," Lakris promised. "I'm going to show Frosif some of his tricks, too." "Including the telepathic call?" Lakansu asked with a sly smile. "Especially the telepathic call," Lakris said, smiling back. "Everybody likes that one." Actually, Lakfro could remember a couple of the other ranchers being rather annoyed when they found out how Lakris's telepathy worked. But they'd never had a sense of humor to begin with, so they didn't count. "Just remember the Agbui still don't know a lot about the Chiss," he said. "Make sure you tell her the truth before she leaves today, so she doesn't go back to her parents with wild stories about Chiss telepathy." Lakris made a face, but nodded. "Okay." She finished her fritter and stood up. She hesitated, eyeing the platter, then scooped up 2 more and wrapped them in her napkin. "See you later," she said, and headed for the door. "And before you offer Frosif one of those, make sure Agbui can digest everything that's in it," Lakansu called after her. "I will," Lakris called back over her shoulder. She started to grab her usual jacket, paused, and pulled out the heavy checkered brown one with the brass sealer instead. "I'm going to need this one, okay?" she said, holding it up. "Go ahead," Lakfro said. "Just remember that if you get Kumeg mash in the sealer teeth, you're the one who'll be cleaning it." "I won't," Lakris said. "I mean I will. Clean it. Bye." With a last wave, she bounced out of the house, only the soft latch keeping the door from slamming behind her. "She seems to have found a friend," Lakansu commented as she sliced a bite off her own fritter with a knife and fork. "Yeah," Lakfro said. "Seems to." Lakansu eyed him. "You still don't like having them here, do you?" "They're not exactly brightening up the neighborhood," Lakfro growled as he took another fritter from the platter. "Well, they haven't crushed the seedlings," Lakansu said, ticking off fingers. "They haven't frightened the U-balls or spread plague through the herd. They haven't poisoned the groundwater with their spice plots." All of which Lakfro had loudly predicted when the Agbui first arrived. He hated it when people quoted his own words back at him. "They've got crowds of gawkers pressed up against our fences staring at them," he said, ticking off fingers of his own. "They've got number squinters from Red Hill flying in twice a day." "Once a day," Lakansu corrected. "It was twice a day at the beginning," Lakfro said doggedly. "And they're so damn touchy." Lakansu frowned. "What do you mean, touchy?" "I mean they want to touch you all the time," Lakfro said, an unpleasant shiver running through him. "That Haplif mostly. I'm trying to explain our contour bunding on our hillside plots, and he's trying to touch my hair or the back of my neck or someplace. It's creepy. I think that's just part of their culture, Lakansu soothed. I don't think they mean anything by it. I know it's part of their culture, Lakfro growled. You and Lacris may not mind it, but I do. Have you told him that? I've been hoping that me dodging away from him every time he tries it would give him a clue, Lakfro said sourly. So far, not so much. Some people have to be told directly, Lakansu said with a shrug, especially when it's so much a part of them that they probably don't even notice it. Well, if he does it today, maybe I'll try that, Lakfro said, looking at his chrono. Speaking of today, I've already lost way too much of it. See you later. He took his plate to the sink, gave Lakansu a quick kiss, and headed out. First step would be checking the Kumeg seedlings to see if the traps had caught any of the insects that had been sneaking bites. After that, he would check on Lacris and see how she was doing with the U-balls. He shaded his eyes from the rising sun. Lacris was over by the U-ball pens now, the Agbui girl Frosif beside her. On second thought, the Kumeg seedlings could wait. The two Mitigers were chattering away as he walked toward them, and as he got close enough he could hear Lacris insisting that U-balls were among the dumbest things on four legs, while the Agbui girl insisted she'd seen dumber animals trained to do actual tricks. I suppose it's possible we could do something with them, Lacris conceded, as Lakfro came up behind them. I mean, if we can telepathically call Grozers, we can probably get through a U-ball's thick skull, too. Are the Chiss telepathic? Frosif asked. I didn't know that. Of course we are, Lacris said airily, pretending to look around. Let's see. That Grozer over there. See, the big black and brown one? Watch. I'm going to mentally call him to me. She pointed to the Grozer with one hand, surreptitiously getting a grip on the tab of her jacket's brass-toothed sealer with the other. She pulled the tab down, and Lakfro heard the faint zipping sound, and with a muffled screech, Frosif threw herself flat on her face on the ground. Lakfro broke into a sprint, his pulse suddenly pounding in his ears as panic bubbled in his throat. Are you all right? He called, images of death and tears and angry Sodlak officials spinning through his mind. Frosif? Are you hurt? What happened? Are you all right? I'm all right, the alien girl called, already picking herself up off the ground. She was shaking, Lakfro could see, her hands twitching as Lacris helped her brush the dirt off her clothes. What happened? He asked, coming to a halt beside the girls. That sound, Frosif said, sounding embarrassed now. It scared me. Lakfro looked at Lacris, saw his same confusion in her face. How? He asked. It just, never mind, Frosif said, sounding even more embarrassed. It was stupid. It's not stupid, Lakfro insisted. Come on, Frosif, you could have been hurt, and it would have been our fault. The least you can do is tell us why it scared you. Frosif's shoulders seemed to sag. It reminded me of a bad time, she said, her long fingers stretching out and idly running through Lacris's hair. It was the sound of something falling out of the sky. Her other hand reached toward Lakfro's head. Reflexively, he twitched away. What kind of thing was falling? He asked. Something scary. Abruptly, Frosif dropped her hands to her sides. I have to go, she said, backing away from them. I'm sorry. I'll see you tomorrow, Lacris. Wait, Lacris said, starting after her. It was just my coat sealer. Here, see? She ran the tab up and then down, the sealer making the faint sound as the metal teeth locked together. I trained Slobber to come when I did that. I have to go, Frosif said. She turned, nearly tripping over Slobber as the Grozer obediently trotted up in response to Lacris's call. The alien girl dodged around him and headed toward the Agbui ship, breaking into a run. Dad? Lacris asked, her voice confused and miserable. It's okay. Hun Bun, he said, wrapping his arm reassuringly around her shoulders. You didn't do anything wrong. There was no way you could know that sound would set her off. I know, but Lacris trailed off. I don't get it either. Lakfro gestured toward the sealer. Let me hear it again. She ran the tab up and down. It sounded just like it always did, small metallic teeth locking together and sealing the garment. No idea what she thought she heard, he said, shaking his head. Do you think I should go apologize? Lakfro peered across the grazing land. Frosif was halfway to her ship, and a couple of the aliens who'd been working their hillside spice plantings had paused to watch her. No, let her be, he said. I don't know what you could say that we haven't already said. Go ahead and get the U-Bulls out and grazing. Maybe she'll come back on her own. Maybe, Lacris said, still sounding unhappy. I'll go check the Kumeg, then come back and help you, he continued, giving her a quick hug. It'll be okay, Lacris. Just give her time. Okay, Lacris said. Come on, slobber. Lackfro watched her open the pen gate and start the livestock moving toward the north grazing ground. Slobber and his fellow grozers moving in on both sides to keep the herd together. Then he turned and headed toward the Kumeg, running the sound of the sealer over and over in his mind, wondering what in there could have scared the alien girl so badly. By the time he and Lacris headed home for lunch, he still didn't have a clue. But an ominous suspicion about these alien visitors was starting to form in the back of his mind. Someone from Counselor Lakuviv's office should be dropping by soon for their daily Agbui check. Maybe, for once, he'd have something new to ask them. I'm sorry, Frosif said petulantly, wincing as her mother dabbed the slowly oozing blood off her cheek from the scratchy grass she'd landed on. Sure, Haplif said with some grumpiness of his own. Apologies weren't going to do anything but waste time, especially since the girl didn't sound particularly sorry anyway. All these months, and now is when you decide to go all trauma victim on us. Enough, Shimkif said. Her voice was quiet, but there was an ominous warning beneath it. Recriminations are a waste of time and breath. I know, Haplif growled. But now? I didn't mean to do it, Frosif snapped. If you're looking to spread blame, remember that you're the one who pushed those flat blast artillery shells onto both sides, Shimkif said. Those are probably the ones the Chiss girl's sealer mimicked. Yes, fine, Haplif said impatiently. Speaking of the girl, how did she react to the whole thing? Frosif shrugged. Worried and embarrassed, mostly. I didn't get any suspicion from her. What would there have been to be suspicious of? Shimkif asked. Since when does suspicion need anything solid to drive it? Haplif countered. What about her father? Lackfro, Frosif shook her head. I don't know, Basawet. He didn't let me touch him. Haplif muttered a curse. No, of course Lackfro wouldn't have. The damn rancher was absolutely and resolutely paranoid about being touched, and that could be a problem. Haplif and the other Agbui had everyone else in the area pretty well under control, from Counselor Lakoviv right down to Lackfro's sparky-eyed daughter. They'd done quiet but thorough probes, and everyone's weaknesses and life cravings were mapped out and already being manipulated. But not Lackfro. Haplif had managed enough pass-bys to have a vague idea of the rancher's goals, but only the general and ill-defined ones of contented family and successful ranch. In the meantime, Haplif had none of the precise triggers he would need to nudge Lackfro into doing what the Agbui wanted. What about Yopanek? Shimkif asked. He's one of them, and he hasn't got much to do right now. Maybe he could go talk to them and smooth it out. It doesn't need smoothing out, Frosif said. I already told you she's all right. Besides, Yopanek's living out his dream of mixing socially with the high and mighty, Haplif said. We don't want to interrupt that by throwing him at some random rancher. A random rancher you can't control, Shimkif reminded him. Maybe I can't control him, but his wife can, Haplif said. What would she think of some genuine Agbui jewelry, especially jewelry that so far has only been given to her family's local leader? She'd be suitably impressed, Shimkif said, her forehead skin crinkling in thought. Yes, she'd probably be inclined to gloss over anything about us that might bother her. And if she gives us a pass, Lackfro's not likely to stand in her way, Haplif said. That much I know about the man. Maybe a brooch for the daughter, too, as an apology for frightening her. We could, I suppose, Shimkif said, a little doubtfully, but that means 2 more brooches out in public and not in the hands of the elite. We have enough to spare, Haplif assured her. More to the point, I don't want to have to watch my back while I'm focusing on Counselor Lakuviv. All right, Shimkif said, still sounding reluctant, but it'll be on you to keep track of them. We don't want any news leaking out until we're ready. It won't, Haplif said. Everything's on track. He gave a little snort. Besides, there's nobody around here but other yokels. Who are